Okay, so we're going to go on to our next collection type. The first collection type was lists, and the next collection type, which is this type, is called tuples. You could call them tuples, but the actual correct pronunciation is tuples. So what is a tuple? I'm just going to copy a whole bunch of stuff into here. A tuple is a collection which is ordered and unchangeable. What do we mean when we say ordered? When we say that tuples are ordered, it means that the items have a defined order and that the order will not change. So that's pretty simple and straightforward. And what does it mean when we say unchangeable? Tuples are unchangeable, meaning that we cannot change, add or remove items after the tuple has been created. So let's just go ahead and let's make a tuple. And we can just say T for tuple. We could use anything, but we say T for tuple, and we just set it to, say, for example, 100 and 200. And just as and we will go into this, but we could make a list and we could make it 100 and 200. So tuples use round brackets or parentheses, and lists use square brackets. So that's there's a very strong similarity in between how they both look. So we just have 100 and 200, just have two different numbers inside the tuple. And we can print T for tuple, and we get 100 and 200 inside the round brackets there, or the parentheses. And we can print the type of the tuple of the variable T, and we get class tuple. So that all seems to work as expected. Now let's just take a look. Let's get the elements. And let's, for example, try to print the first element. So how do we print the first element of a tuple? It should be something like T0. So we're indexing it in the same way that we would index a list. It starts at index number 0 and it comes inside of the square brackets, although we use round brackets here for the definition of a tuple. So when we're calling the index of a tuple, we are using square brackets. So T0 should be the first element, which is 100. Let's just try that out. And we get 100 back, and we'll just do print, close the brackets here, and just for labeling, the first element item, we'll call it first element. And then we can also do the second element, and that should be index number 1. We've only got 2 elements here. We could have made the tuple as long as we wanted, so we could have had 300, 1000, and whatever else we wanted in there. And we could even had, like, trues and false. We could mix our data types as well. That would all be acceptable. So we've got the first element and we've got the second element there. The first element is 100 and the second element is 200. Let's just shorten our tuple because we don't need all the rest of it for the purpose of the example or what we're going to do. Now, one of the things of tuples compared to lists, or at least let's just try to change one of the elements. So with lists, we could do something like T0 equals, and then it was 100, so let's just make it 101. So we're going to increment it by 1, and we try to run our code, and we get this error message here and this error message here. And the error is a type error. Tuple object does not support item assignment, so we're not allowed to do this. We're not allowed to change the values of the items that are inside our tuple. So let's just do what we have commonly done before. We just put a little note here, so we can say cannot change a tuple. So a tuple, T-U-P-L-E, and we'll just stick that inside so that we gracefully exit without throwing this error message and breaking the rest of the code. We'll do a try except block, and we will move this line of code up here and let's just pass a nice error message, so something like print cannot change tuple value, colon, and then we'll do our exception and except exception as E, and then we will print our error message as well. So that's a graceful pass through of the code. That's all that this try except block does, because we don't want to have this nasty error message, this type error, stopping the rest of the code. So when we run that, we get cannot change tuple value, and this was the actual error message. Tuple object does not support item assignments. That's what we're not allowed to do, and that's the purpose of tuples. So let's do a comparison anyway. But lists, we saw that with lists, I think it was that lists have 12 or roughly 12 methods, and we're going to see how many methods tuples have. But I can already tell you that tuples have 2 methods. But let's just try this out. We can do T, and then we'll start with a list just by way of comparison. So let's just take this same tuple here and stick it there and convert T to a list. And the way that we would have it as a list is if we had not a square brackets and closing with square brackets. So that's a list, and this one here is a tuple, and the only difference is the square brackets to the round brackets. Square brackets for lists, round brackets for tuples. Now let's just see our list items, or the methods on lists. We can do L and then dot, and we can see we've got append, clear, count, copy, extend. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It looks like it's 11 methods. I put 12. We have roughly 12 methods. We've got roughly a dozen methods. Anyway, we can do the same for the tuple. We can do T and then dot, and we see that we've only got count and index. They are our only 2 methods that are available to us. So tuples have only 2 methods. They are count and index. And let's just have a look, and we'll go through some of them. So let's steal from our example above our list of names, but we're going to change these names into a tuple. So instead of being a list, we're going to change it into a tuple. In order to change it into a tuple, we need to have the round brackets around the whole lot. So I think I can do this. Yes, everything goes into round brackets. So when we run our code, everything's running fine at this moment. So let's just put some extra lines in there, and let's just try the count method. Count over here, and we will do something like names dot count open brackets, and it says here we're going to return the number of occurrences of a value. And we've seen this count thing before in lists. It's just kind of like very similar to, it is the list method effectively. So return the number of occurrences of a value. So let's just say, for example, everything here in our list occurs just the one time. So let's just take that and take Darren, and we'll just check that's the case. So, and one thing is the count function returns back. We see this arrow saying that it returns back an integer item, which an integer which is the number of occurrences. So we'll just create a variable called occurrences, and then make that, and then assign that the value of whatever comes back from this count function. And in our case, it will be number 1. So let's just print this out as well. Print number of occurrences. I think it's spelled with an E actually, not an A, so it'd be occurrences, but let's just keep it like that anyway. And occurrences, and we will just run that, and we get number of occurrences 1. So that's all perfectly good. And now let's try the second method, which was the index method. Again, we could just see that we could do names and then dot, and we could see that's the index method there. And actually, returns the first value of the index, and if it wasn't present, we'd get exactly the same error message, and we'd have to do that same try except block to gracefully pass through it as what we would have done with lists and what we did above earlier here, because it would throw us the error message if it was empty. So this is index, and the index returns the first index of a value. So let's just say that n equals names, and again we can just look for Darren because it's easy enough to look for, and it will have an index position, index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3. So we're expecting to get something at index number 3, and we can do a print of, and we'll do an F string here because it might be convenient for us. Darren occurs at position n, and that should say that Darren occurs at position number 3 because we're expecting that names.index of Darren, which gets assigned to the variable n, will have the value of 3, and we run that piece of code and we indeed get Darren occurs at position 3. Now, just for the purpose of being a little bit cleaner, let's just do like a name. We'll just say name and then equals Darren, just for something to find, and then we will do name in here, and also name, because we like to use variables as much as possible so that we only have to do this value once anywhere, and then if we wanted to change it, we don't have to change it in multiple positions. And also down over here we can probably stick in a name, and that should give us all of the same results, but in a much nicer, cleaner way, and we do get the same results. And that way, if we wanted to look up someone else, say for example Charlie, we'd still get the same count because everything here in our list comes up once, but over here the position would change, and Charlie's one position in front of Darren, so it goes from 3 to a 2. Let's just run that piece of code, and that's exactly what we get. And that is the basics of tuples in Python, and they're kind of like similar to lists, but they're more rigid in the sense that there are less methods available on them, and we can't there's no extend or append, so we can't extend and append. And we also saw that it would throw an error message when we try to even change the values inside of the tuple. Although if we had collections in it, we could change the value of collections, but that will be a little bit more advanced. So that's tuples in Python.